Welcome to Loretto Motherhouse. While Sisters of Loretto live in several states and countries, this is the place we call home. On these grounds, we have a working farm, an infirmary, retreat centers, financial offices, residences for the community, such as Havern Apartments and Clare House, and a number of historic buildings. One old building, 1885, was recently renovated to become the Loretto Heritage Center, Archives and Museum. Our history here begins with the arrival of Reverend Stephen Baden, a French seminarian who left his homeland due to persecution of Catholics after the French Revolution. He arrived in Maryland in 1792, finished his seminary training, and was ordained in 1793. He was sent to Kentucky later that year and established himself on this land, which he called St. Stephen's Farm, in honor of his patron saint. After living in a cabin for many years, he built this dwelling in 1816, but then left Kentucky in 1819. It is said to be the oldest brick building in Marion County. Next to it is his statue, which contains one of his bones. Although Baden wanted his heart to be buried here, he died in Ohio, was buried at Notre Dame, and somehow only one bone was sent to be buried at Loretto. Baden had owned the land on which Notre Dame stands today. He had given it to the priests for a school for poor boys. In the area surrounding Baden's house are three buildings built around 1873. First is a residence for sisters that is referred to simply as the 1873 house. This was originally the home for single men who took care of the farm. The second is the guest house, which was built for the resident chaplain and visiting priests. Third is the main building of the retreat center, Nobb's Haven. From here you can see Baden Pond, named, of course, after Father Baden. Annually, it serves as home base for geese. This little family, however, came from a lake on the back of the property, stayed long enough to get all in flying condition, and then moved on. In this area, you also will see a grotto built in 1922 with money donated by the family of one of the sisters. One side depicts the setting of the apparition of Mary at Lourdes. The other side portrays the scene of Jesus' agony in the garden. The grotto is next to Nobb's Haven, formerly the guest house. The retreat center now occupies this building and the third floor of the Academy building. In total, the center can house about 25 persons. It is open to women and men, individuals and groups, church or non-church, any persons seeking solitude. It does not offer preached retreats, and the groups that come bring their own leaders. Cedars of Peace, a set of cabins on another part of the acreage, offers space for individuals desiring to spend short or extended periods of time in reflection. Stewart Hall is another residence for sisters. It was built about 1913, a catalog house assembled on site. It connects with Rhodes Gallery, an art gallery and studio for Sister Jean Duber, artist in residence. Many of her works are displayed in the gallery on the second floor of the building. Rhodes Hall was actually the first school built on these grounds. The Sisters of Loretto began in 1812 at St. Mary's, Kentucky, about 10 miles from here. The place was named Little Loretto. The founders were Mary Rhodes, Christina Stewart, and Anne Havern, three frontier women, along with Reverend Charles Nerinckx. They began as school teachers, but wanting to dedicate their whole being to God, they asked the priests to help them form a community of women religious. The women were received as the first members on April 25, 1812. Due to some property transfers, they moved to this spot in 1824, began a convent and church in 1825, by which time their numbers had increased significantly. Between 1832 and 1834, they built their first regular school, the building that is now Rhodes Gallery. Their students were young girls from this area and from other parts of the South. They studied basic subjects plus fine arts to prepare themselves to be cultured mothers of the next generation. The carvings over the porch indicate some of the subjects taught. This statue represents Reverend Charles Nerinckx from Belgium, another victim of the proscriptions after the French Revolution. He came to America in 1804, studied English in Maryland for several months, and then was sent to assist Father Baden here in Kentucky. The two were circuit riding priests. Their territory of service was extensive. Their congregations of Catholics who had come from Maryland were large. St. Joseph Infirmary was built in 1947 on ground formerly occupied by what was called the Middle Building. In 1858, the original church and convent were destroyed by fire. The students were sent home so the sisters could occupy the school until their quarters were rebuilt. The Middle Building was rapidly constructed as a temporary structure for residence so that school could begin again. That building lasted almost 100 years and was taken down to make room for the present 85-bed infirmary. The church and convent were rebuilt after the fire, around 1860-1863. The church was long and narrow, and the convent was added to make an L-shaped structure. The brickwork was done in a pattern known as common bond, with bricks laid with the narrow end facing out every seventh row. The same pattern is evident in the 1873 buildings. This added strength and insulating space. In 1980, after Vatican II, the church was refashioned. The entrance was changed to the north end, the altar moved to the center of the church, the pews arranged in semicircular pattern, and solar gray windows replaced the stained glass. The interior walls were stripped of years of plaster, and the bricks were painted white. A southern pine ceiling was installed. Treasures which had been stored in a museum area were brought out and placed in the church. Note the corpus of Christ on the cross at the altar, the 1817 statue of St. Joseph in the entrance vestibule, and the harp brought by a novice in the 1860s. The small area at the south end of the church is called the Pietà Chapel. On the wall hangs a Pietà painted by a Belgian artist, Goetz, dated 1821. Because the devotion of the sisters is to the sufferings of Jesus and the sorrows of Mary, this painting portrays it well. The full title of the congregation is The Sisters of Loretto at the Foot of the Cross. The Blessed Sacrament is not reserved in the church, but rather in the Adoration Chapel, adjacent to the church. Here you will see a statue of Mary, dated 1807, still in perfect condition. It belonged originally to Father Nerinx, was cherished by him as my statue, and was in the first convent of the Sisters of Loretto. As you walk outside toward the Academy building, you may look back and see where windows and a door formerly existed at the south end of the church. The area is bricked in a manner that shows the original design. Looking upward, you will see the wonderful old bell tower, which for many years has called the sisters to prayer. The Academy building, now a building of multiple uses, was built between 1886-1888. In the late 1800s, the number of students and of sisters necessitated more space for the school. If you ask some of the local people, where is Loretto Motherhouse, they may say they do not know. They do know where the Academy is, although it ceased to be a school for girls in 1918 and was used thereafter only for further instruction of the sisters before they were sent out to teach. As you walk toward the cemetery, you will see a diorama of sisters teaching in an early school. The interior pieces are made from chalkboards that had been in the academy. The rules for the school, as posted, are most interesting. The first reads as follows: "No denomination is refused if willing to observe the rules of the school. The other denomination will not be forced on Sunday and Holy Day to go to the chapel and perform our Christian duties, but they must suffer to be friendly. Invited in the school, they are to be present at every exercise, and to behave, if not in a religious, at least in a civil manner." This is the old, still functional powerhouse. Several years ago, the Lebanon Enterprise ran a special section on historical places in the county. To represent Loretto Motherhouse, they used the powerhouse rather than the academy building, the church, or something else significant. We suppose their choice was because of the obvious cross on the building, or perhaps it was to show this place as a powerful house of prayer. On the way to the cemetery, you will see Father Nerinckx's house, which was originally built in 1812 at Little Loretto. It was moved to these grounds in 1895 at the request of the Superior General. When the sisters moved to this present location in 1824, they burned their convent and other buildings, but left the cabin intact. A family had occupied it over time, and so when the sisters wanted it here, they paid the current owners $100 for half the logs, transported them over the miles, and reassembled the building here. This is, therefore, only half of what was a double cabin. The bell in front, cast in 1660, is the mission bell, rung on special occasions, such as when sisters leave or return from a foreign mission. Inside the cabin is the altar built for Holy Mary Church at Calvary, Kentucky. It was made in 1807 at a cost of $160, according to a letter written by Father Nerinckx. He said he would have to pay part of the cost himself. The tabernacle is from Belgium, purchased on one of his 2 trips to Europe. The 6 white and other non-white marks on the altar are reliquaries, cases for relics of saints. The white card at the left lists the names of the saints represented in each case. The original crucifix, also from Europe, is in the Heritage Museum. Here you see the right side of the cabin, showing a portrait of Father Nerinckx, a window installed later picturing St. Charles Borromeo, Nerinckx's patron saint, and a replica of a double cabin. On both sides of the walkway to the cemetery, you will see statuary of the 7 dolor stations. These 7 pieces recall Mary's sorrows from the prophecy of Simeon to the burial of Jesus. In the middle of the cemetery is the central crucifixion group. At its base is the grave of Father Nerinckx, and buried on either side are 2 of the early members of the congregation, Sister Mary Rhodes and her blood sister, Sister Ann Rhodes. Anne was elected the first Superior General in June 1812, but died in December of the same year. Her sister Mary, one of the founders, was then elected to the office. If you visit the cemetery, the earliest graves begin at the front of the left section and work to the back. Then on the far right side, the graves begin with the earlier ones at the back and proceed to the latest at the front. There are large markers for sisters who have given their bodies to science, and others for those whose cremains are buried here. At the left of the cemetery, on a line with the central grouping, is the Slave Memorial. This was erected in 2000, when the 3 religious orders of women, established in Kentucky in the early 1800s, held a special reconciliation service in recognition of their role in the practice of slavery in the 19th century. Listed are the names found of slaves who lived on Loretto properties. The AIDS Garden was developed in recent years. 4 relatives of Loretto community members are memorialized here. This is a beautiful site for prayer and reflection. Atop the hill, across from the AIDS Garden, sits the old black tobacco barn. Used now only for storage, the barn serves as the display board for the quilt pattern that is Loretto's part in the county quilt trail. The design is the log cabin pattern that fits well our early history, reminding all of Loretto frontier days in Kentucky. And so the circle tour of Loretto Motherhouse is complete. From here, the sisters took their missions north, south, east, but mainly west, establishing grade and high schools, colleges, and foreign missions in China, South America, and most recently Pakistan, and also serving in Central America and Africa. Loretto is happy to call Kentucky home, to share this history with the people of Marion County, and to welcome you from wherever you have come. As you visit the museum, we hope you will learn more about Loretto, past and present, and dream about what the future missions may be. Thank you for coming.